Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I am Yusra Ghazi, a Master of Theological Studies candidate at Harvard Divinity School and a junior fellow here at the Center for the Study of World Religions. Welcome to our panel this afternoon. Last year, the city of Cambridge reported around 357 individuals who were homeless persons in the Cambridge area, and 46 families, for a total of 485 persons experiencing homelessness in our community. There are a number of organizations that address the needs of the homeless population, and today we will speak to the representatives and hear from the representatives of two initiatives, the Outdoor Church and Cambridge Advocates for a Common Toilet. What makes them distinct is the way in which they are rooted in faith communities. From my experience speaking with these individuals, they are individuals inspired by their faith traditions to serve the homeless. And you may have noticed that the title of this event is Homelessness at Harvard, how helping others can save the world, and I intentionally selected a very provocative title for this event because I myself have been involved in interfaith work for my entire adult life, and I believe that something really important happens when religiously diverse people come together. People inspired by their faith and secular identities come together to impact social issues. And so I actually applied to the Divinity School to study this further. There's a growing set of social science data that tells us that there is something important happening, some bridging and building and bonding that happens when different people come together to address important community needs. And so I hope that we will all take in the perspectives of our panelists today. We will learn about their work and take a closer look at how the faith aspects either hinders or helps the support that they offer to the homeless. We'll start with opening remarks from each of the panelists, and then we'll have conversation for the second half of our time together. And as we prepare to get started, please feel free at any time to have more food. And note that everything that we have here, one of the best things about being a student at the Divinity School is how environmentally conscious everyone is here. So please note that everything that you have are eating with are compostable, except for the cans for soda. So there is a compost bin right next to the door over here, and it's marked so you'll be able to see it. So feel free to compost everything that you have at the end of your meal, and you can toss the aluminum cans in the recycling bin. With that, I'll begin with our introductions. Professor Richard Parker is lecturer in public policy at Harvard Kennedy School of Government and senior fellow of the Shorenstein Center. He's an Oxford-trained economist, and his career before coming to the Kennedy School in '93 included political consulting, journalism. For example, he co-founded the magazine Mother Jones and chairs the editorial board of The Nation, philanthropy. As executive director of two foundations, he donated more than $40 million to social change groups, social entrepreneurship. He grew the environmental group Greenpeace from 2,000 to 600,000 supporters and helped launch People for the American Way and raised over $250 million for some 60 nonprofits. His academic articles appear in numerous academic anthologies and journals, and he writes regularly for magazines and newspapers. He's here today to tell us more about his work with Cambridge Advocates for a Common Toilet. We are also joined by Reverend Thomas Hathaway. He is minister and executive director of the Outdoor Church in Cambridge, and he's an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ. Reverend Hathaway studied linguistic anthropology at St. Lawrence University, and after spending several years in Japan as a high school English teacher, he entered the Master of Divinity program here at the Divinity School in 2008. And during his time here, he served the Outdoor Church as an intern and volunteer and joined their staff in 2011. Last but certainly not least, we have our peer, Zach Kersey. He is a third-year Master of Divinity student at Harvard Divinity School. He is the former music director for the Outdoor Church, the co-web designer for Cambridge ACT with Reverend Hathaway, and pastor at Community United Methodist Church in Brighton. Welcome, panelists.
What I'll do in just a few minutes is describe what ACT is about, how it came into being, and why I'm involved. And I think I'll start with the third because it's perhaps the easiest to understand if you understand something about the American religious landscape. I'm an Episcopalian, actually a seventh generation Episcopalian. My father was an Episcopal rector at one parish for 42 years. Now, I'm part of the West Coast branch of the Episcopal Church. We're neither smells and bells. We come from a much lower church tradition than you might often encounter here in New England or other parts of the East Coast. A friend of mine once said, Richard, the church you go to is kind of like a Methodist church with wine. It's not really Episcopal. And I actually love the tradition I grew up in. My mother said that my father thought all his life that the Holy Trinity was Father, Son, and Franklin Roosevelt. And believed that doing social justice was an intrinsic part of having a faith. It's also the case that as the son of a rector in a small town, I did probably 35 years of church in 15 years. And when I went off to college, I didn't darken the door of a church for probably a dozen years after I left home. I've slowly come back to the church because I find it offers comfort in a variety of ways. It provides a sense of continuity to me and tells me something about where I come from, and it offers a promise of being in a community that I can share my concerns and doubts and faith with, because another feature of my particular kind of Episcopalianism is that I am a doubting Christian. I have my questions to ask about my faith, and I have my questions to ask about all faiths. And if I tried to live without doubt, I don't think I could have faith. But without faith, I would live only in doubt, and at this stage of my life, I'm not willing to do that. ACT came into being about a year and a half ago because Christ Church, which I've attended for the 22 years that I've been here at Harvard, decided to close its doors to the homeless. Specifically, Christ Church for nearly 30 years had run an open-door bathroom policy at the church, recognizing that there were no public facilities available in Harvard Square for the homeless. There were a couple of troubling incidents involving drug use, overdosing, and harassment of female church staff members. And the vestry and rector very reluctantly, after almost a year of back and forth discussion, decided that they had to close those doors. We all regretted it, and it seemed to me that we had to do something more than just close our doors, because there were no other doors being open as ours closed. And so with a group of parishioners, we sat down and invited parishioners from other Harvard Square churches, from the Harvard Square Business Association, and from several of the homeless shelter programs here in the larger Harvard Square area, to sit down and ask what we could do. What we decided to focus on was getting the city of Cambridge to build a public toilet in Harvard Square. We discovered it's been an issue that had been raised before with the city manager and the city council. In fact, several times over the last 30 years, there have been campaigns to construct such a toilet in the Harvard Square area. Many of you who grew up in Cambridge also know that we don't have a lot of public toilets anywhere in Cambridge, not just Harvard Square. It was an experience of mine as the father of two young boys of trying to find a place for boys to go to the bathroom when they were playing field hockey or soccer or baseball on Cambridge's public parks. And so it was an issue that had been in the back of my mind. I'm not a toilet campaigner by nature, maybe some of you are. I've been told, by the way, that November 19th is actually the United Nations officially sanctioned World Toilet Day. And we have actually coordinated our next meeting with the Cambridge city manager for November 20th. We plan to take some of the celebration of World Toilet Day with us on the day of the meeting. The important thing about doing this kind of work as a church is that there is an ethic within the churches and religious traditions that calls on us to act on behalf of others. And so there was no difficulty in persuading members of the congregation that something should be done. And it's also the case that because Episcopalians are out of a mainline Protestant tradition, we have no discomfort asking government to do things that many other traditions would prefer to have done through private charity. Our feeling was that it was impractical to ask private firms to open their doors on a routine basis. They had their own stories to tell about problems. And that really was a civic responsibility of the city of Cambridge and the state of Massachusetts and the federal government to address these issues. So we began by holding a series of meetings with representatives from other groups in the Harvard Square area. We were fortunate enough to attract these two, Steve Jobs and Wozniak, I guess Jobs and Wozniak, are two Apple computer people who helped us construct a website that gave, particularly for their generation, a great deal of authority to the idea of what we were as an organization. I come from an older 1960s civil rights and anti-Vietnam era where we relied more on petitions and demonstrations. But I must say that going forward in the 21st century, I think that this combination of petitions, demonstrations, public hearings, and the use of information technology offers real possibilities for making change in dramatic new ways. We found that the new city manager who came into office this past June knew plenty because his staff had gone to the website, had seen the petition, and realized that we'd collected thousands of signatures in Cambridge in support of this and could find almost no one, in fact, who was opposed to the idea. What I'm proudest to say is that the city manager, as of August, has committed the city of Cambridge to build a public toilet in Harvard Square. They're tentatively planning on locating it in that little island called MacArthur Park. Oddly enough, that was a song when I was young, but nothing to do with public toilets, as I recall. And it's right on the middle of Mass Avenue between the Harvard campus and the Unitarian Church. There's a picture of a statue of Seward, I believe, on the, there now. However, this being city government, they're now telling us that, well, they plan to put the line item for the toilet into the fiscal year 2015 budget, which means that the funds wouldn't even initially become available until July of next year. And again, given the way that government works, it's a very real possibility that they might not get the toilet open until the middle of 2015 or even late in 2015. So we're now planning a series of further meetings with the city manager. We've been lobbying the members of the city council. We have solicited the endorsement of all 24 of the city council candidates, including all of those who are running for re-election. We've got probably 2/3, is that fair to say now, Zach, who have endorsed us. And so our feeling is that we can move this forward, and our concern over the next couple of months is that we move it forward quickly rather than slowly. Just to conclude, however, it's important to know that we simultaneously lobbied the T, and the T has a bathroom downstairs at Harvard Square to the immediate right of the bottom of the escalators. What I'm proudest to say is that it is now open. It has been refurbished, repainted, restocked, and they have placed signs both at the top of the escalators as you enter the T structure and at the bottom of the escalators as well too, to guide you in that 180-degree turn to the bathroom. Is it gold-plated fixtures? Is it marble floors? No, but it's someplace that's usable while we try to get the city-built toilet constructed above ground. So it's a small project, but it's a reminder that a small group of people can leverage large things, or at least meaningful things, for many more people who are in need. So the job's not done. I'm not going to pat myself on the back. I'll pat these two on the back for the tremendous work they've done. But I think we're headed toward a win. So thank you for inviting me to tell this story.
My name is Thomas Hathaway. I am, as you sort of pointed out, the Executive Director and Minister of the Outdoor Church of Cambridge. And my relationship with the Outdoor Church actually began far before I arrived at Harvard Divinity School, because when I felt the call to ministry in 2004, I got online and started looking up seminaries and divinity schools, and I came across the website on Harvard Divinity School's website for their field education. I came across the Outdoor Church's website, and it was a church that took seriously, I guess, Christianity's professed concern for the poor and the marginalized. And I flipped through their webpage, and I was just kind of struck that this is a church that really lived out the values that it professed. And so that prompted me to apply to HDS, where I was accepted. And then I started interning there in my second year, volunteering my first, volunteered my third, and then right as I graduated, a position for executive director opened up. And so I'm glad to join their ranks as a member of their staff. So that being said, the Outdoor Church, many of you at HCS know about it because I've seen a lot of you out there on our Saturday programs making sandwiches and taking them out into the street. But for those of you who don't know, We are a church for and among chronically homeless men and women in Cambridge. As Yusra pointed out, at any given time in Cambridge, there's about 400 people who are homeless. About half of those people are men and women who are chronically homeless, meaning that they've been out on the street for a year or more. Some of the men and women we serve have been out on the street for as many as 20 years. So our goal is simple. It's just to take the church out to men and women who would not access conventional church resources on their own. These are people who, for guilt and shame, for anger or embarrassment, won't enter conventional church buildings. So that is our mission, and how we carry that out is each week we hold 2 worship services outdoors. If you're ever around Porter Square at about 9 a.m., under that big kind of red statue thing that moves, it's kind of an eyesore. But under that, we have our 9 a.m. worship service of prayer and communion. We have a very traditional liturgy taken from the Book of Common Prayer. So it's familiar to most of our congregants are actually ex-Catholics. So it's a very traditional service. But rather than preaching at people, we invite people to share the reflections on the text, and we join together in prayer, and we join together in communion. So that's at 9 a.m., and then at 1 p.m. we have a service over there on the Cambridge Common. It tends to be a little smaller and also a little less noisy there on the Common. And then directly after our service, we head out into the streets, and we take socks and toiletries and sandwiches and juice boxes out into the streets to meet people where they're at. As opposed to other street outreach churches doing street outreach in Cambridge, we don't have an evangelical bent. We don't seek to pound people over the head with the Bible or ask them to convert, but we really seek just to meet people where they're at. If people want to talk to us about the Red Sox, we're delighted to talk about the Red Sox. If people want to talk to us about the weather, we're delighted to talk about the weather. But then if people are struggling, are going through crisis, we are happy and we feel privileged to accompany them in that journey too, and be the spiritual resource that they need. Be it if most people are coming from Christian backgrounds, but we have a lot of professed agnostics, and one of our longest, one of our parishioners who has been with us for the full 10 years of our ministry is actually a Jewish woman. So we're glad to accompany her and be a spiritual resource for her as well. So that's Sunday, and then on other days of the week, just like any other church, we have an extensive program of pastoral visiting. A lot of our folks end up sleeping at one of the 3 shelters that are around Cambridge, so we visit people at shelters. If people end up at prisons or mental institutions, we visit them there. So we do a lot of pastoral visiting. And then as of 3 years ago, we started a Saturday meals program, acknowledging the fact that on Saturday evenings in Cambridge, there's not a lot of meal programs available to the men and women we serve. And so rather than just taking this on ourselves, we kind of recognize that ours is a mission of the Cambridge community as a whole. So we organized local churches and Harvard Divinity School who actually make the sandwiches and take them out into the street without using our leadership and going around the route we usually do. And seeing faith communities pick that project, pick that activity up, and really take ownership of it has been remarkable to watch, because rather than supplying us with materials or supplying us with money to go and serve people in need, they're actually going out and serving people in need themselves. They're making relationships with these people, and all of a sudden, this big monolithic entity known as homelessness ceases to be, and all of a sudden, homelessness is the person in Harvard Square who you've been passing by, and now you know that their name is Bob, or now that you know their name is Ray or Judy. It's been remarkable to see, and just this past Saturday, a bunch of folks from HDS went out, Yusra among them, and yes, hearing their reactions, that, oh, these people who I would never have thought were homeless, and I've been walking by all this time, it's eye-opening. It's a great thing to see. And then one of the other things that we do for the folks out on the street is we offer memorial services for people who have passed away. A lot of times, because these people aren't affiliated with a single faith community, their friends have no kind of formal way to express their grief. So we usually hold our memorial service at Christ Church, Cambridge. And just 3 weeks ago, we had a remarkable service for a young lady named Colleen, who unfortunately passed away from a drug overdose. And at the service, 125 people from Cambridge, people who just knew her, who had met her on the street, service providers showed up and offered powerful, powerful testimonies at the service. So it was, I think it was even for the past, so that was 3 weeks ago, and people are still coming up to us and telling us how much having the opportunity to celebrate their friend and remember their friend, how important that was for them. So that's the center of our religious and worship life. And then we got involved in Cambridge ACT as an organization because I guess we see the real effects, on the ground effects of what not having a toilet means to people. There's people who show up to our worship services who have soiled themselves because they have IBS and just could not, get to a bathroom soon enough. And the depth of shame and embarrassment that kind of thrust people into is very real. And so we felt an ethical and moral compulsion that, yes, this is an activity that we need to be involved in. This is something that our folks need. So that's part of the reason we're there. The other reason is that you may not know this, but if you don't have access to a bathroom and you have no choice but to relieve yourself on the street, if somebody passes by and then sees you doing that and then calls the police, you'll get charged with lewd and lascivious behavior. So if that happens 3 times, through no fault of your own, you're thrown onto the sex offenders list, which means that you then have to report in to the police on a monthly basis. So if you're out on the street already and you're struggling with mental illness or you're struggling with substance abuse issues, and you're having a hard enough time just keeping your day-to-day together, if you're worried about where you're going to be sleeping at night, in addition to that, you have to worry about reporting into the police every month, or else you're going to have a warrant put out for your arrest. It's another level of anxiety, anxiety and hardship that our folks have to deal with. So that is just another kind of impetus for us to get involved as a community of faith.
Well, my name is Zachary Kersey, and I'm a third-year MDiv candidate at the Divinity School, and I'm also currently the pastor at Community United Methodist Church in Brighton. And my involvement with the Outdoor Church is actually a really interesting story. I came to HDS and I came to the field education panel, and I heard about the Outdoor Church of Cambridge and how it ministered to people in their lived situation, in poverty, on the streets. They were a church without walls, and that sounded like a church that I really wanted to be involved with. So I came back to my house where I'd been living for 2 weeks, and I went up to my roommate, Tom Hathaway, and I said, hey, I heard of this really cool church, and, I've been wanting to think of ways that I can use my music ministry, I'm a musician, to really positively impact the lives of people who are living in poverty. And I wonder if maybe, they are in need of a music director. And Tom says, well, I'm actually the executive director of the Outdoor Church, and that's something that we've been wanting to do for a long time. And so I kind of came together in this magical, serendipitous way, and it all worked out so perfectly, and I worked with the Outdoor Church for a couple of years. And there are a couple of quotes that I think have really guided my understanding of what homeless ministry is. The first quote is by Mahatma Gandhi. And he says, whenever you're about to make a decision, think to yourself of the poorest person that you've ever met and ask yourself, is what I am about to do going to in any way positively impact them? So the idea for Mahatma Gandhi was that at our base level, every decision should be based in our desire to help the poorest of the poor, to help people who are oppressed by our society and who aren't given voice. So that's the first quote. And the second quote is by the founder of my religious affiliation, John Wesley, who said, part of the reason why the rich have so little compassion for the poor is because they so rarely visit them. And that is what the outdoor church does every day. We go and we visit people in their homes, and their homes happen to be the streets that we walk past every day. We visit them in their homes, and we are guests in their homes. And like good guests, we bring food. And that's what I think our ministry really is meeting people on the ground where they are. And I think that as a Christian and as a member of the world, I'm called to help meet the basic needs of every person. And the reason why I became involved with Cambridge Advocates for a Common Toilet is because everybody poops. It's something that we learned from the time we're children, but for some reason the city of Cambridge, the city government that we have, doesn't seem to recognize that basic need. They have cited for a reason why they don't provide public toilets several things, one of which is they're concerned with cleanliness and safety. They're concerned with what type of activities are going to occur on the grounds of this toilet. Two, they're afraid that it will encourage people to live in public spaces. So they basically think that having a place to use the restroom will encourage homelessness. And then the other thing that they say is that there are already toilets that are available to people in Harvard Square through the local businesses and churches and the T. So the problem is that there's 8 million tourists that walk through Harvard Square every year with one public toilet that isn't always open and isn't always advertised. 8 million people, one toilet that doesn't work. And when someone comes into your house to visit with you, someone is a guest in your home, and they ask to use the restroom, you don't send them to the Starbucks down the street. You provide for their basic needs. And as Tom was mentioning, with the possibility of being put on the sex offenders list with using the restroom outdoors, what that essentially does is it makes being homeless illegal in the city of Cambridge. Because by making going to the restroom illegal, you're making being homeless illegal if you don't provide adequate facilities for them to do this basic human function that all of us share. And so Tom and my main involvement with ACT was something that I think is something that all of us have basic knowledge of, is that we have basic understanding of computers and social media. And so Tom and I were able to make a website and make a Facebook group and do an online petition and do basic printed materials and things like this. Like, our involvement hasn't really been that difficult. It was a basic thing that we were able to do. But the basic things are the important things. And even though it's a small contribution, it's a contribution that's really, I think, been able to make a major impact on people's lives. And so I invite all of you to visit the website, cambridgeact.com, to join our Facebook group, which is growing, to sign our online petition, and to look out for ways that you can become more involved, because every one of us can make a difference for people on a very basic level. And a lot of times all it takes is just to kind of raise your voice in a holy clamor and say, we want this, we need this, because the people that we care about need this.
All of you talked about your personal faith identities and that aspect coming into play and what motivated you to serve the homeless. My question is around how, if there is a relationship between your more faith-based or faith-oriented work and the non-religious or secular organizations out there in and around Cambridge that are also serving the homeless population.
Yeah. So at the Outdoor Church, we draw a major distinction between social service and then our ministry. So that means that, well, it's not that we don't recognize the value of social services. Cambridge is actually a relatively resource-rich area for homeless folks. So what we work very closely with other care providers, so that when we're out on the street and someone has a particular need, be it, like let's say we come into someone who's really trying to get into housing, who really wants that, we need to know, what resources are available. So we send them to Homestar in Central Square. So there needs to be more collaboration among even the care providers, just because Everybody's kind of working on small budgets and everybody's overworked, so there's not a lot of time for kind of umbrella work, thinking about how we all work together as a community of care. But as much as possible, we try to draw people into that circle and connect them with the resources that are available to them.
I'll piggyback on that. The outdoor church, and I would say ACT also, has no delusions of grandeur. We do not think that our goal or end goal is to end homelessness. We are not resourced to end homelessness. It's not in our capabilities. It's not in our skill sets. But the skills that we do have are skills that are equally important, and we're able to exist with people where they are. And so the first week that I worked as music director, Jed Manis, who is also an HDS alum and the founder of the Outdoor Church of Cambridge, said that I needed to think of the work that the Outdoor Church does as a hospice ministry. The reason being because our focus is on the chronically homeless, people who have been homeless for a year or more, and who odds are going to remain homeless until they die. So our goal is to live in ministry with people and to communicate the love that we have for them and the love that God has for them. Not to think that we're somehow saving them by giving them a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But that's not to say that giving them that peanut butter and jelly sandwich is not important, because we're providing them with a token of love and respect. And I think that providing for basic needs is equally important to ending systemic problems. And so at the same time as we provide those basic needs, we connect them with organizations that are resourced, hopefully to one day end these systemic problems that we are not able to solve.
Thank you. Mr. Parker, would you like to?
I would just add that I do much of what I have done with ACT, not for the homeless, but for myself, to remind myself that I live in a world with people who have fewer resources, and reawakening myself to that reality is sometimes as important as the act of compassion you offer to another person. So there's some self-serving going on here.
Yep.
Hi. Thank you all very much for sharing about your work. So I volunteered with the Outdoor Church, and one of the things that I found most striking was that we prepare the lunch and we actually take it out to people where they are. And I was wondering if you, Reverend Tom, could speak a little bit to that experience of not so much inviting people into the space and saying, here, come meet us, but actually going out, putting foot to pavement, and serving people.
Absolutely. So speaking as a Christian, I have certain theological commitments. And one of those is that I feel like the Outdoor Church's ministry, it is an incarnational ministry. When you're taking it out, I think, especially in the snow, when you're really like yanking this cooler of sandwiches and juice through Harvard and Central Square, and you're cold, you're really in your body, you know. And for me, the Christian story is a story about how God came down to earth to be with people. And as much as possible, I think we as Christians, we're called to go out and be with people, to go out with people in their context and be with them. And I also am the director of a soup kitchen, so I think there is a need for hunger relief programs that as a common sense strategy for feeding a lot of people. However, there are always going to be people who don't have the capacity to access those resources. And I think it's a moral and ethical commitment saying that, yeah, we need to go out and take things to those who need it. Yeah, so that's how I'd answer that.
Kim.
Yeah, I have two quick questions. First of all, on the issue of this lascivious thing, I mean, I don't think I have many illusions about how deeply inhumane and how classist a lot of American and Cambridge, Massachusetts law is, but I was shocked by that. Well, in addition, I mean, I think it's great to provide toilets, but shouldn't we get something done about that law? I mean, isn't that law outdated at the very least? And shouldn't we at least redefine it so there'd be a difference between going to the bathroom and you know, exposing yourself for the kick it gives you? So that's my first question. The second question is more a proposal or more my take on this. I think the idea of toilets is great, but I think that these toilets should be construed and set up. First of all, I think they should provide wash facilities because I think people also like to be clean. But I think it should also be a place where we wouldn't mind going to the bathroom. When I need to use the bathroom in Harvard Square, I go to the Charles Hotel. You go here. Now, that doesn't work. That doesn't work toward less marginalization or less ghettoization of these people. So I wonder if there could be ways of construing this washing and eliminating facilities so that we would use it too.
So you should know that if you go on the Atlantic Monthly's website, you'll find an article on the so-called Portland loos. And this is literally a construction that we're trying to persuade Cambridge to pay attention to, that tries to address some of the city's repeated reasons for not building a public toilet. It's very attractively designed. It's stainless steel. It has a wash basin, but the wash basin is on the outside of the facility, not on the inside. And it is entirely usable by anyone, and anyone would feel comfortable, I believe, using it. It also is slatted at the top and the bottom, which allows both for constant ventilation to keep odor and things under control, but also allows police passing by to keep an eye on it as well too. We're a little worried right now about whether Cambridge winters will work with that kind of slatting system. But at this point, I'm very much in my life a half a loaf rather than no loaf man in terms of trying to get a toilet built. What we've said repeatedly to the city manager is that as far as we're concerned, this is a test case, a pilot case, and that we know that there are needs for these sorts of facilities all across the city. But if we can get past this first hurdle and assuage the concerns of the manager and the people that he listens to, then doing all of that will come more quickly. So it may not be that we can get a Charles Hotel level toilet put into Harvard Square next to the... No, I'm being facetious. Right. But we're trying to be very attentive to quality and feel that goes with the design. But again,
have you looked at the French style?
Yeah, and they've been a disaster when they've been used in the United States. Yeah. Seattle, San Francisco, and a couple other cities experimented with them, and something about Americans was able to destroy toilets that aren't destroyable in Europe. So
well, what about the legal?
We are Americans.
What about the legal approach?
All right, so I think the
What kind of
second part of
interest
your
is there?
question about the legal, so why petition for a common toilet? Why not get all those signatures together and get people to change the law?
So I guess there are a couple reasons, one of which was we were focused on this eminently practical issue because it had arisen out of watching my church close its doors and not seeing other churches volunteer to open theirs. So the situation, and talking with Denise Gilson of the Harvard Square Business Association, the concern of lots of business people that the day after those doors closed, there were pools of urine and piles of feces in the alleyways between the buildings, and it was going to be a disaster on several levels, public health as well as personal dignity. So we focused on what would solve that problem by providing a facility. To be honest, I haven't focused on turning toward resolving that law. My attention actually right now is starting to move toward a program called Raise Up Massachusetts, which is an attempt to raise the minimum wage in the state of Massachusetts by $2 an hour, because when I think as an economist, I move constantly between the micro and the macro, and when I look at the problems, not specifically of the homeless, but the oftentimes near homeless, who outnumber them by tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands in the state, I want to get those wages up, because I know wages are intrinsically important to keep from manufacturing more homelessness and more suffering. So it's a good issue. It's just not one that I know that in the coming year that I'll turn to. I'm going to get this done, and then I've got one foot in the Raise Up campaign. You guys,
Well, I'll just chime in that I think that the toilet conversation is kind of geared towards homelessness because Zach and I are here right now. But the people who are supporting this organization, like we've sat out and had people write postcards to the city council, and some people do express moral outrage that we're not providing a service for homeless folks. But then there's so many stories about parents, who are walking through Harvard Square and have nowhere to take their child to go to the bathroom. The Youth Soccer League is also an organization who's involved in Cambridge Act. And on the Common, there's softball teams and students, and this is a good thing for
Well, haven't
tons of different
feminists had
situations.
pee-ins at Harvard Square in past years? They had pee-ins right in Harvard Square.
Your generation a little too late for that. That's my generation. That was a whole thing that was going on.
Not that
Yeah.
long ago.
Sounds like a crazy time.
And in reference to the French style toilets, in a lot of European countries, they'll have a place where you can pay a few cents, is usually about $50, and it gives you 15 minutes in the place, and then it opens up,
Yeah,
and as you
right.
leave, basically at the end of the day, will flush itself out completely, like water will spray on the
Yeah,
inside.
exactly.
And that's a really inventive design because it pays for itself with people giving money, and then it also has advertising on the outside. And that was something that we looked into, but other American cities have tried these, and there's a great aversion in America to having to pay to use the restroom,
Yeah.
and so they've failed. People just will not pay 50 cents to
Paying
use the
people
restroom in
to use
America.
it, yeah.
And so the Portland Loo is a similar design that's free.
So I saw a hand here and then one there. Jared.
Yeah, thank you guys for bringing this subject up. I think it's a great time of year to start thinking about this too.
Absolutely.
I'm curious. You know, when I first arrived here at Harvard, it was shocking to see how many homeless were outside the walls of the richest college in the world. And you know, I think about Washington D.C. Has a number of homeless people. You know, at the state capitol, one of the richest countries in the world. And so I'm curious, what are these institutions doing? What is Harvard doing that's attracting 8 million tourists, you know? Because Harvard Square is a center for a lot of homeless people. Is there a reason for that? And does it have to do anything with the college being here? And as you know, with great wealth comes great responsibility. And so what is the institution doing to play a role in this? I know you guys are part of the institution, but at a higher level, what are they doing beyond public, you know, the public agents that are responsible?
So I'm a Dartmouth graduate. I never expected much from Harvard.
And you were disappointed.
I've never been let down. Aim low, walk tall. That's you know, I haven't bothered to deal with Harvard on this issue. It's just it's an enormous bureaucracy. I do know some people in the administration, but it seemed to me that there was more to gain by actually teaching people how to mobilize and to become comfortable working with one another across denominational boundaries, across work boundaries, than it was to go to Mass Hall and get somebody to write a check. That can be done. That produces a solution, but it only produces a certain kind of solution, and it doesn't build the capacity that this work has been building, because there are going to be other issues. I mean, some of the people who are working with us on ACT are already wheeling with me to collect signatures for the Raise Up Massachusetts petition. We were all out in force on Oktoberfest passing out petitions for toilets and passing out petitions to raise up the minimum wage. Now, we kept them in separate hands because it was too confusing to explain why pooping and wages were tied together. But building that capacity is more important for me in the long run than getting the specific toilet bill, or whether Harvard comes on board with a check for $50,000. So.
Yes.
I really want to respond to this gentleman's question. To be fair to Harvard,
Don't do that.
through Phyllis Brooks' house, Harvard really co-sponsors really one of the most outstanding student-run shelters from November to April. And they also, it's entirely volunteer run, and you know, some of the kids are probably kind of naive. I manage a men's shelter, so I have some contact with them, but it's really, you know, I'm really sort of impressed with what they can do with what they have. The other thing, I'm glad you brought up the minimum wage, Richard. This is just sort of off topic, but I manage a men's shelter, and I've been driving around for work with Harvard. If you want to call driving around Cambridge this fall, driving. And it occurs to me, and I'm really not like scapegoating cops at all, but it occurs to me that this police detail officer is making between 300 and 400% more than what a human service worker who is tending to the homeless, advocating for housing. Actually, in a broader context, working with school-age children and caring for elderly Alzheimer's people.
Sure.
So I think one of the things, that I think people maybe when I talk about how to make this. You guys are. This may be stretching the topic. Thinking about sort of realizing this from an interfaith perspective, and you spoke of this work as incarnational, but for a lot of people, it's also a profession and a career, and it's scandalously unsustainable. And so I just want to sort of make sort of put a plug in for the sort of career people. There was a gentleman who just recently retired, who was well into his mid-70s. He was kind of a case manager, social worker for Bread and Jams, and which is this sort of all-purpose agency that kind of provides multi-services to the homeless. It is a great day drop-in center. I mean, for people with ability have nowhere to go. If you're leaving your shelter at 8 p.m. and you have a cold or you feel like crap, you can go get a hot meal there. And but he, this guy, I don't know if he was sort of touched by if he was divinely inspired. His name is Arthur Shirtliff, and I just have to say he was really one of the most amazing people, and I think the gift he has that it sounds like all you guys were referring to this is it's the gift of listening. I think a lot of people sort of approach me with this sort of age-old conundrum, and I never know how to answer it, is do I give them money when someone asks me for money? And to me, it's about you and your sort of content. I usually don't. I mean, I just because I don't have it, and I'm better equipped to direct them to where there are resources.
Can I jump in
Sure.
to what you're saying? I think it's really important in the context of the Divinity School to think about several key facts. The first is that America is by far the most religious of the Western industrial democracies. It has the largest membership in terms of percentages of population in churches and synagogues and other religious organizations. It also has the highest crime rates, the highest poverty rates, the highest homelessness rates. And so there is something that has structurally failed in the relationship between private belief systems and the delivery of what any other industrial democracy would consider essential normative goods and services. I think a central reason that it has failed is that we are a disestablished country in which those churches concentrated more often on their congregations than on their communities. One of the nature of a multi-denominational society is that unlike the Catholic Middle Ages, there was no parish assigned to one geographic area so that one was a member of a parish and served both by the government and by the church in the ways that that labor might have been divided. The other thing is that I think that there still is a profound divide between the mainline tradition I come out of and much in the evangelical tradition, which from my vantage point is very dangerous in the evangelical tradition, which is an emphasis on personalism. It's an important feature of evangelical Protestantism to have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and I don't want to say that that's in any way something I theologically object to. But too often in that evangelical tradition, there is no capacity to build in social structure that incorporates the use of democratic government or other institutions than individual or small group charity as a means for addressing suffering and poverty. And I have a fundamental ecclesial and theological quarrel with that, and I'm relentless on it. And I'd be glad to talk with anyone at great length about why I am relentless on a doctrine of personal redemption that ends up as a doctrine of personal charity as a surrogate for well-funded, well-financed, well-paid work that delivers necessary social services in a capitalist economy that's incapable of maintaining full employment.
I think we could all talk at great length about this topic. And I'm growing aware that we are coming toward the end of our hour together. And I just wanted to make sure that we all took one more opportunity to thank our panelists